Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light, and this is my channel. It has been a minute since we have done a segment on paranormal and supernatural news. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, for those of you who have been around a while, you will know that these segments are unedited. So you may hear something in the background, and you may also hear me stumble over some words. That's my bad. For those of you who are new, same thing goes. Also, if you are new, before we go any further, please subscribe and click that bell so that you can be notified about any new content I put up. Okay, settle on in. Today's subject is spontaneous human combustion. Now, you may say, Exit Light, is spontaneous human combustion really paranormal or supernatural news? And I will say to you, in 1976 there was a book written by Michael Harrison. The book's name is Fire from Heaven. And in this book, he says that spontaneous human combustion is caused by a poltergeist. His hypothesis is that a poltergeist draws the energy from a human to use for itself, leaving said human in a pile of ash. He concludes his book by stating that spontaneous human combustion, fatal or non-fatal, belongs to the extensive range of poltergeist phenomena. So, there's at least a small chance that it does belong in this segment. So, before we get to the newest case of spontaneous combustion, we're going to go over a couple other ones. On July 2nd, 1951, a woman, whose name is Mary Reeser, was 67 years old. She was found burned to death in her house after her landlady realized that the home's doorknob was extremely hot. The landlady called the police, and upon entering the home, they found Mrs. Reeser's remains completely burned into ash, with only one leg remaining. The chair she was sitting in was destroyed. During the investigation, the detectives found that Mrs. Reeser's temperature was 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot. This puzzled the investigators because everything around her in the room was intact. Mrs. Reeser took sleeping pills, and she was a smoker. So their theory was that she took a sleeping pill, she fell asleep, and dropped her cigarette, and then it ignited her nightgown. So let's take a minute to think about that. The woman was sitting in a chair. She took a couple of sleeping pills. She fell asleep holding a cigarette, and somehow that managed to burn her body so badly that it was a pile of ash that was still 3,500 degrees by the time the cops got there. Yet, nothing else in her house was burned. That doesn't seem like a realistic theory in my mind. Okay, moving on. Henry Thomas was a 73-year-old man who was found burned to death in his living room in 1980. His entire body was incinerated, leaving only his skull and a portion of each leg below the knee. The feet and the legs were still clothed in socks and pants. Only half of the chair he was sitting in had been destroyed. His death was ruled by a coroner as Death by burning. No kidding. The man's a pile of ash, wearing socks. Pretty sure he burned. And again, nothing else in his home was affected by this fire, including half of the chair the man was sitting on. Half of the chair was still intact. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a logical argument. Then, in December of 2010, there was the death of Michael Faherty. He lived in Ireland. And the coroner who looked over his autopsy claimed that he had died of spontaneous combustion. His statement read, "This fire was thoroughly investigated and I am left with the conclusion that it fits into the category of spontaneous human combustion, for which there is no adequate explanation." This seems to me to be one of the strangest phenomena I've ever heard of. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that a dropped cigarette in one case would cause someone to be 3,500 degrees. It makes no sense that you can thoroughly burn to ash as though you're being cremated, yet have half a chair remaining and your entire house and everything around you is untouched. So we're going to look into a few things that most spontaneous human combustion cases have in common before we do the last one, which is the most recent. So, most spontaneous human combustion cases have some of these things in common. 1, the victims are usually chronic alcoholics. Does that explain it? Could that explain it? A lot of alcohol in your system? But then again, how does that explain, only half a chair burning or nothing around you burning? I mean, alcohol does burn quickly. Could that be it? They are almost always elderly females. Let's see. The hands and the feet usually fall off, which would make sense because they're being burned so hot and so quickly that they become ash. So it makes sense that the hands and feet would fall off, I guess, right? The fire has caused little damage to other combustible things that come in contact with the body. And the body usually leaves a greasy, really putrid smelling ash. I don't want any of that. I don't want that. Can you write that down somewhere? I don't want to spontaneously combust. Okay, so moving on to the most recent case, which happened last September in 2017. So there was a man whose name was John Nolan. He was 70 years old. He lived in the UK. This is a case completely different than the other ones we just talked about, because this man was not in his house. He was not in a chair, a recliner. He was not on sleeping pills, asleep. He was walking down the street at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when he spontaneously burst into flames. Many of the witnesses who saw it happen ran over and tried to help him, and unfortunately, Mr. Nolan died from his injuries. There was a statement given, and this is how that reads. "We have spoken with a number of witnesses who saw Mr. Nolan ablaze, but we have yet to establish how the fire started. Mr. Nolan was a well-liked member of the community, and none of our inquiries so far have indicated that he had been involved in any dispute of any sort." So, meaning nobody set him on fire, most likely. Nor does any account given by witnesses suggest that he had been in contact with another person at the time of the fire. So again, there was nobody next to him on fire. There was nobody next to him with a lighter and sleeping pills, alcohol. And I want to be sure to make it very clear, I am not making fun of the way these people have died, because I can't think of a worse way than this. That has got to be extraordinarily painful and excruciating. But we're talking about the causes for why this could happen. And in which case, I want to say that I have this last one figured out. So I don't know why nobody's called me yet. Because within 30 seconds, I could have told him this. A man walking down the street in the sun burst out in flames. He's a vampire. Duh. What else could there be? And if you don't think that belongs in paranormal and supernatural news, I think you're in the wrong place. Thank you for coming along with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please give it a big thumbs up. The more comments that are left, the more thumbs up that are left, the more likes that are left, the more we get to be suggested, the more our channel gets viewed. So please take an extra 3 seconds and do that for me, and I would really appreciate it. Good night. Sleep tight.